hello everyone. Hope you're all having a good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. We're just going to wait a few more moments for some more people to join. I can see we've got Seth, Rumi, Stephanie, Sharon. There's a few more people coming through. But I'll start with my introduction today. So if we haven't met previously, my name is Martha Whiting, and I'm the content marketing manager here at Wynter. And today we've got a very exciting Wynter Workshop guest today. This is Dustin, who is our research strategist at Wynter. And if you didn't already know, we're an on-demand market research platform, and we deliver your test results back from your target customers in less than 48 hours. Now, primary research is really important. And why? Well, what your team thinks resonates and what actually drives customer decisions are often very different. And primary research works to eliminate that disconnect. It provides that concrete foundation needed for messaging that truly converts, or working out that positioning that actually differentiates. So today, Dustin is going to walk you through how Wynter and primary research can help you win, and for all the best practices for getting the most out of your primary research. So before I hand over to Dustin, who's going to walk you through absolutely everything, just a very quick housekeeping. So I'm going to disappear off the screen in just a moment. We're going to be having a Q&A session towards the end. So please do keep your questions coming in throughout. Dustin's here to answer absolutely everything. So please keep them coming. You can pop them in the Q&A box, and you can also pop them in the chat box. Both is absolutely fine. And I'll be back on the screen towards the end to answer those and to ask Dustin all your questions. So I'll disappear off the screen now, but please join me in welcoming Dustin. Thank you.
Hey, somebody did the wave emoji. Perfect. Thanks. Cool. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to swap my screen really quickly. More wave emojis. You just got to ask sometimes, and that's, you're going to get what you want. Let me get my screen up. Cool. All right. So today we're going to be talking about wins with Wynter, how B2B companies are using Wynter. I'm going to give you a little preface for some people on here may know me. I know we got several customers signed up for today's call that I've probably talked with, but a lot of people won't know me. But this little table setting is going to be useful for everything that we're going to go through today. So I'm Dustin. As Martha said, I'm the research strategist here at Wynter. My primary role is working with our annual accounts on their test strategies, their implementation, what they're getting out of Wynter, what they're doing with Wynter. So I have seen tons of ways that people are utilizing Wynter, and worked with them on, hey, how do I test this, or can I test this, and how can Wynter help me with this or that? But so that is a lot of what is built the foundation of what we're going to go through today. But one of the most frequent questions I've been getting recently is what are other companies doing with Wynter? So that is more specifically what we will be spending some time with today. So what I'll be walking you through the majority of this time that we have this morning is actual step-by-step playbooks that I either recommend based on experience from having worked with tons of different customers. Like I've been at Wynter for like about 3.5 years. I was freelancing with Wynter before that, so I have seen countless amount of tests and implementations that people are doing. I've given people creative ideas. They've done creative things as well sometimes. And so all of that is going to kind of be distilled into some initial playbooks of some of the most typical things that I see teams doing to drive success. There are tons of other ways that we could still utilize Wynter beyond what we're going to cover today, but these are some of the ones that I more immediately recommend if you're just kind of getting up and running with Wynter. So we'll kind of go through and break that down and giving you some actionable things to really go do. But before we start that, I have some prerequisites that I want to go through. Like I said, I know that there are some customers here, and I know that there's probably plenty who are not. Since we are going to be like in the weeds a little bit, I mean, maybe that oversells it, but we are going to be talking about very specific things that I think we're going to need to make sure everybody has an understanding for. So I don't want to be doing a demo of Wynter here, but I need everybody to understand a couple of things. Otherwise, a lot of this content that I have for you today is not going to make a whole lot of sense. So really quickly, I'm going to segue to just kind of getting that leveling out of the way here. So if anybody doesn't know, or if you're new to Wynter and you haven't heard my spiel before, the message testing is what Wynter is primarily known for. As we're going to see today, it's not the only thing you can do with Wynter. The real strength of Wynter is being able to get in front of your target audience and getting that results back in 48 hours, as Martha said. So there are plenty of other ways beyond messaging that you can utilize Wynter. However, we will obviously talk about some of the different messaging tests that we have available. And it's important, the two that we really will focus on repeatedly today are the full page test as well as the landing page test. And what are the differences between these two? what I normally tell people is you're going to get much more targeted information on the full page test, and you're going to get more broad strokes, generalized feedback with a landing page test. You can put any type of page into either one. There's no hard and fast rule that it only has to be a landing page, but the way that people take the test and then the results that you get will change. So that's important to keep in mind as we go through some of the suggestions today about when or where you should utilize either of these tests. To give you a quick understanding, this is an example of a finished full page test. And the key difference on the full page test is when you set this test up, you're going to select what we call a highlight area, and you will be directing the test taker to that specific portion of the page and then having them answer questions about that portion of the page specifically. So you're going to be able to drill in and target and get very granular information. You'll be able to ask a set of questions about that section and then go to another section of the page and step and repeat, do the same thing. So in the end, you're going to get a lot of very targeted feedback. They will also then at the end review the entire page, everything they've seen, and kind of ask some follow-up questions about everything that they've gone through. So a lot of deep insights with the full page test. The landing page test really just strips that highlight functionality away. So really what you're going to do is present the page. And so it can be a pretty in-depth page like this pricing page, and then ask a set of questions about that. So you can see now I've still got quite a few questions that I'm asking, a lot of good open-ended feedback, and some Likert scale questions, but I'm not directing them. And I refer to it more as getting a pulse check. The more copy you have on here, the more broad it will become, which is why it's called a landing page test. It will perform better with less copy, but you can still run pages through here that maybe you just don't need that kind of rich detail with. So that's a key bit to understand. Also, we have the ability to run surveys. We'll talk about this quite a bit today as well. This is really where I see teams being able to extend and get the most out of Wynter more often, is utilizing our target customer survey. By default, this is a 10-question survey, but you can expand it to more questions. And we have plenty of templates. Again, I'll call on several of those templates today, but you can customize these. You don't have to utilize those templates whatsoever. They're really just there to kind of help you get started. If you're not so comfortable, that's a space that I find people are often not so comfortable about. Which questions should I ask? Am I asking the right questions? Am I saying them in the right way? I will say as a pro tip there, you'll find that most of the time when you're writing surveys in Wynter, the saying them in the right way is not always what you're after. We're not often running scientific surveys here. There are times for sure when the way that we write things matters. The way that we're asking things definitely can matter, but I think you don't have to get as concerned about it the majority of the time, but the templates are there to help you out as well. So we'll be talking about those. And then the other one that we'll be talking more about today as well is the preference test. And this is a key to understand how this test works. This is a test where you can put 2 or 3 options in front of the audience. They choose one based on a prompt question, and then there's one qualitative follow-up question. So an example of this one, for instance, here was just 2 options. This was for some LinkedIn content that we were doing for ourselves. So we were comparing different companies. And here we asked, 30 product marketing directors, VPs, and marketing directors. And you see 19 preferred this option versus 11 on this option based on the prompt question that was there. And then importantly, you get the qualitative here that goes along with it. This is what I really love about this test is you get a little bit of quantitative information, not enough to be like statistically significant or anything like that, but you're going to get the qualitative that helps explain the data that you're getting here. So you can do this from anywhere from 3 to 100 people if you want more confidence in those choices. But the qualitative that's going to explain why people made the choice that they did is pretty much really very enlightening, no matter what data you end up with. Even if you end up with a 15-15 split here, the qualitative data is still going to provide a lot of understanding as to how you ended up in a 15-15 split. And also, I would say that in my time here, I can think of maybe about 2, maybe 3 tests where this actually was 100% one way or the other. So that's never likely to happen either. So that's important to understand what that test is as well. All right, so that's enough of my demo pitch of Wynter. We're going to close these down and come back. All right, so those are some of my prerequisites to get out of the way. Now I do have a couple more that are important. If you want to be able to do proper testing, you need to understand why you're testing. Importantly, you need to be able to make sure you're clear on what you're trying to learn, like what's the objective of this test. Certainly, you can just go run some tests in winter. It's very easy to set up and run a test in winter, but you want to make sure that you're not burning bandwidth, you're not burning budget, things like that. You want to make sure you're targeting the specific decisions that are going to be made, which is going to allow you to be able to take action faster as well. Taking action is the most important part of doing anything with winter. Otherwise, it's going to be something that is just a nice to know, but it's not benefiting you or your teams or your customers or anybody else. Also, making sure that you're taking the time to plan your test is going to allow you to ask better questions, which will give you better insights. I know I just said that we don't need to be overly concerned. Part of that's because we have a lot of good default questions within Wynter. We have tested these questions ourselves in a variety of ways to know, are they going to produce the type of insights that people can rely on? And I would say when it comes to like the page testing, both the landing page and the full page test, people often, overwhelming majority of the time, use our templates to begin with. Sometimes there's going to be customization that you may or may not need, or you just want to ask various different questions as well. You have the freedom to do that, but the templates that we have in there are likely going to get you the majority of the way where you want to be able to get the type of insights you need. And then lastly, we want to make sure that you're building repeatable and strategic habits. If you want to build winter and not even just winter, but any qualitative insights really, into your actual processes. And so doing that is going to be a lot easier if you're putting together like a test plan. So I have a link here. I'm going to show you this really quickly. This is just a simple Google document to outline an idea of what you want to be putting together for your test, or maybe your cadence of test if they're around a specific topic. Feel free, you can take the link from this in the deck afterwards, or copy this yourself. It's really not that complicated, into just a simple structure about what your business objective is. I've got an example of a short write-up of what you might want to be putting in there. There's a drop down for which type of test you're going to be utilizing in winter, if you're using this in winter. What are you testing? Like, what's the actual stimuli? So if you have, pages that you're testing or whatever, can put the graphics in there about what you're testing, who your audience, who you're going to test with. This again is built around the way Wynter structures it. So if you're presumably using this for winter, these are the info that you're going to need for every winter test. What seniority are you testing into? How many, what are the job titles, and how many responses do you need? And then these are some optional things that, if necessary, you can always add those as well. And then as well, there's a list of which questions do you want to ask. What are you going to, so you can just document which questions you're going to be utilizing. So pretty straightforward, right? But at least you're taking the time to think through about what it is that you want to learn from this. That's really probably the most important part. Like, what are we trying to drive out of this? Because this will help you make sure that you have decisions that can be made and actions that can be done. And then the rest of these are just, making good, clean habits out of your testing. And then I also put on here, again, because I work with a lot of our annual customers, I know some teams have other controls that they want internally to kind of approve and so forth, to launch a test before that. So just a little way to track that as well. So nothing too complicated, but I think it's good practice if you want to be utilizing some playbooks and so forth to be able to do that. And go to the next slide. The other step of that action then is making sure you take action on this, right? If you're just testing something and letting it sit there, then you've spent some money and you maybe learned some things that you think are interesting, but you're not really going to be making any measurable improvements. So you want to make sure that you're aligning, to take action, like we said, and then understanding, again, iteration is the key, right? You're going to learn some things. The thing that I like about winter tests as well is it still takes your knowledge, your expertise to be able to understand. Sometimes it might be one person's response that sets off a chain of events that you can really drive great outcomes from as well. But it still relies well on you understanding what to do with that and having your knowledge there. And I have a previous workshop as well where I kind of break down the process of doing like a thematic analysis and how to go through winter test. Could be useful for you as well. And also probably will be updated sometime in the near future as well. All right. So with that, we're going to jump into the more tactical playbooks with everything kind of set there. So I'm going to go through, like I said, some of the more typical plays that I see teams utilizing in winter. And what we'll go through is like the goal of that, how to use it, which test do either I recommend or do I see customers utilizing, as well as like some suggestions for the questions to ask and so forth. So we'll kind of cruise through these in general, and there may be some questions about any of these later. Feel free to, like Martha said, ping those in the chat now so you don't forget them as we go, and I can always deep dive and jump into any of those when we get to the end of these. So obviously this one has to kind of be first, right? This is still the thing that's most typically orientated to Wynter, still around message testing, probably with something like your homepage, but it doesn't have to be. It could be any other strategic page internally. You've probably got, like a solutions page or something as well, that also gets a lot of traffic, which could be benefited from doing this same exact process. But really, you could use this all. The majority of times that I see teams using this, either one, they're about to just like redo their whole entire website, or they've taken a new positioning shift and they need to create new messaging in general. But something's probably happening that's driving a change here. Although I would argue, even if you don't have those changes, doing a Wynter test is probably going to reveal places that your page can be improved regardless. So even if you don't have like those initiatives lined up, you're probably going to drive really good value and change by still doing this anyway. But in experience, teams are having some internal things happening that are driving this typically, and they're already getting some mixed signals and so forth, and they need to verify a few things. The approach here is, this is really one of the ones that has a little bit more variance compared to the other playbooks that I'll walk you through. Obviously, the full page test is going to be the number one recommended thing that we're going to need to do here. We're going to go through and understand, what of our current copy is cleared, what is resonating with people, what are they liking or not liking, and so forth. I do have a note here in the why this works section for this, that I do see a number of teams that's as far as they go. They really only go as far as number one when they're doing this. And I think that the teams that have done this more successfully go beyond just running that first full page test. While I will basically guarantee you that you're going to find valuable, useful information from just doing the single full page test, these other tests, the rest of this test cadence is going to give you better results, and it's going to give you better results faster. So what that other steps are running a target customer survey along with this. There are a number of things that you could approach here, but really it's somewhat going to depend on what of those changes that are happening drove you to need to kind of run this playbook, right? So you might need to be doing a survey about whatever new positioning that you're doing, or maybe it's just to source new language from your existing audience and strengthening your better understanding of your current ICP. But a supplemental survey to run alongside the full page test is going to give you information that you're going to be able to put into that new version of the page. And so again, we're going to be taking action and writing a new version of the page. The survey will give you a lot more information about how to solve some of the problems that you've uncovered in the full page test. I personally also recommend doing a preference test at the same time with your competitors that you're doing that. The preference test here is going to just kind of elicit some kind of biases, essentially, is how I view it, that people are going to have when they evaluate vendors. So it's, again, if you're going to be doing this initiative, pretty useful to understand, when people are in that buying motion, how they're going to see you versus any of your competitors as well. So I think those three are really the best three for getting up and running with this. And then I also would recommend doing follow-up testing, which again, not everybody does, but again, the teams that do this most successfully, from what I've seen, this is what they're doing. This is going to depend on the results that you get somewhat, right? So you might have some different thoughts or things to do based on what inputs you've gotten. So maybe a preference test is the right follow-up. Maybe you're just going to put a couple different iterations of your hero section or something in there to be able to see which direction you need to go based on the information you got in your previous test. Or then you could follow it up with another test of the new page. Here, I think to save some budget and time, you can do the landing page test. Because here again, now you could argue that you want to maybe do another full page test to really stay granular on it. But you can really suffice well with the landing page test to be able to just get that pulse check. Like, how's your page landing when people are just like reading through it as they more naturally would if they were actually evaluating you as a vendor. So I think following up with your new page on at least a landing page test is really good practice, because again, you're going to find things that you probably need to change. And if you've done all of this work and spent this budget to try and make sure that you're getting the best page that you can to put out there for your customers, you want to put that little bit of last effort in to really polish that up, because you haven't tested what you just created. You only created something based off testing, right? This is why this works, is probably a lot of what I just talked about. A little pro tip here that I see teams run into a lot: people get really excited by the fact that Wynter has senior audiences and that they can go test with the senior audience. My question typically when you're doing something like a homepage is, how likely is that senior leader going to be the first one that's actually evaluating your homepage and deciding whether you're in the consideration set or not? Now, this is going to change on people's buyer journeys and how you sell and so forth. So this isn't the case for everybody, but definitely at the majority of my experience before Wynter and at Wynter, the senior leader is not necessarily the right person to be testing with initially. Now, on this target customer survey, that could be a great place to include some senior leaders. But on the full page test that you're initially doing, test the people that are going to likely see that first and decide whether you're even in that consideration set. You're going to get better results and save some budget, quite honestly. So that's really my pro tip there that I tell teams. Typically, some recommended question sets in this play for the full page test. Again, we have the gold standard set that majority of teams will run here. You can certainly customize. We have other templated sets that are around like clarity and resonance and so forth. But for this initiative, gold standard is going to work pretty well. That's my recommendation. For the target customer survey, we have a template in there around pains and gains. All of our templates for our surveys will need some customization from you. There's going to be empty spots, variables, and things that you need to plug in there. But this is a great starting point for this play. I also would recommend then adding to that template some ranking questions about maybe different value props that you have, so people can put them in order of priority and you know how well they're going to resonate, and then combo that with some open-ended questions so that they can give you some qualitative feedback about why they chose that ranking or the things that they liked and disliked about those value props. That's a good combo to go along with that, again, to give you information for that new copy on the homepage. And then the preference test, these are really default questions that we have in here. You don't need to do anything super crazy or specific with those. As a Wynter win for somebody who's had this is a long time case study that we've had that really walks through this whole process. So even more in depth, if you want to see a bit more like the pages that AppQ's used, some of the surveys they ran and so forth, you can follow this link and you'll get even more information about that. But I think we did one more test here. They did one more test here than what I have outlined on this. But otherwise, basically the exact same play here, and it increased their homepage conversion by 73%, which was phenomenal. All right, our next playbook that I'm going to go through is insight-driven content marketing. This is something that definitely more teams are doing on Wynter these days than they were a couple of years ago. And this is actually a really great because you can build your content actually with your audience participation, essentially, right? So if you're going to need to be putting together a new roadmap for your content, or you want to put together a new content series and get actual data or actual quotes from your customers or your audience type to be able to put into that content and just enrich it in so many different ways, then utilizing Wynter for this is super, super easy and super valuable. The steps that we do here are basically survey. However, there are different ways that you can use the survey. You don't have to do all of these. You're going to be able to align these to what you need to do. Right. So I see a lot of teams actually using the survey to understand content preferences, like what types of content do they want to consume, what topics are they interested in, who do they listen to as terms of influencers. So their content preferences, that's a very standard one I see a lot of teams doing. More and more teams are starting to do ones to be able to collect data and pull quotes from, so they can put it into their data. Hey, maybe we asked 50, VPs of sales what they think about today's topic or something like that, and be able to turn that around into some content. And then also utilizing it just to discover different angles that you want to talk about as well. The reason that this works is, again, you're actually talking to the people who you want to consume this content, but they're not just your customers. They're not just people that are already in your ecosystem, right? Because you're going to want to continue to grow your list and so forth. So what is going to draw people in? What are things that you don't have visibility on that are working well and so forth? You're getting that direct feedback and being able to turn it around in action. This is a really simple, quick, easy way to be utilizing Wynter. And teams come to me and ask, like, can I do this? And I tell them, like, yes, we're doing this ourselves actually all of the time. This has become very reliable for us. If anybody follows us on LinkedIn, especially over the last several months, you've seen a lot of posts that are really being generated from surveys that we have done, that we're being able to build daily LinkedIn content that have like really rich, deep insights, not just the surface level stuff, like when it is backed up by actual survey data. And then we're at the end taking all of that and putting it into an actual really nice content deliverable piece as well. So we're getting LinkedIn content, we're getting long form evergreen content out of it as well. I mean, we're repeatedly doing this right now. So you can go ahead, and this link will take you to like our summarization of the CMO report. And then what I included for you here is this is the actual questions that we used for that CMO report. So we asked quite a few questions, but I have, so it's 2 pages on this one. But this is it. This is word for word the questions that we utilized to construct that all of that LinkedIn content from, and all that CMO deliverable. And like I said, we're repeating this play. We did it once with CFOs. We're doing it with other ones as well. So this is definitely a repeatable play to continue to do. And next one is also something that is growing of interest in Wynter, is tracking your brand sentiment. There's a lot of things that could be leading you to need to want to be able to do this. Maybe often it's because there's some positional shift that is happening. Maybe you've acquired another company, or maybe you just are drastically changing your positioning in the world of AI or something like that, or any variety of factors. But you need to be able to track some brand sentiment. The steps that are here to repeat are pretty straightforward. You're going to need a target customer survey. The first one is going to set the baseline. The biggest thing about this play is you're going to need to do it more than once, though, right? So you need to do that first survey to set the baseline so you know where your numbers are today. And then you're going to repeat that anywhere from 6 to 12 months later. Aggressive teams are going to probably do it every 6 months. In transparency, most of the teams I'm working with that have done this are doing this around every 12 months, or around 11 months, so they can put the report out 12 months later, somewhere in that time frame. So roughly a year long. And then you're going to be able to you want to be able to repeat that cycle going forward, whatever that cadence is, over and over again. The value of doing this here is that you're going to be able to measure how things change repeatedly over time. So you'll have that first survey, you'll understand where you are, where you exist within your ecosystem, and then you're going to be able to make strategic decisions about what you're going to do from that point, and then be able to measure the value of like what changed based on the initiatives that you did. You're going to be able to, what other brand awareness plays that we do, and be able to measure those a year later. Have we increased our mind space in the market and things like that? You're going to be able to have that because you're repeatedly testing the exact same question sets over time and measuring the differences there. So really, the recommended question set here is we do have a market awareness survey template within Wynter. It's the starting point you're going to want, but you will definitely need to modify it for your solution, and you probably need to add some additional custom questions that, again, align better to your solution and whatever is happening that kind of drove that change. Some important notes about this playbook, though, are that you really want a minimum of 100 people for this, and really you would want even more. The caveat there is that at the moment, Wynter, we are growing our own audience for all of our own tests. We're adding people every single day, but we don't have enough coverage for all audiences to go and launch this today either. We have supported numerous customers in this initiative, so you're probably better off talking to us, quite honestly, first about can we help support you in this initiative if you want to do this with Wynter. But you could do this play then as well in other capacities, and you might sometimes want to supplement this as well with maybe other audiences that are not Wynter audiences. Maybe there could be rationale for doing it with your customers and so forth, depending on the questions that you're asking. So that's an important note there. And also, it's important here, I think, to get a range of seniorities, because you're trying to measure the awareness of your company broad, right? Not just within the senior leadership space, or not just with like the user base space necessarily. Again, it could change depending on exactly what you're asking or measuring, but most likely you're going to want a range of seniorities and be able to measure the changes within those groupings over time as well, because you're going to be marketing in a bunch of different ways to those different groups as well. We do have a customer who had a lot of great success, and we have a whole nother Wynter workshop that was just a few weeks ago. as well, about how Maxio improved their brand awareness by 5% in 1 year. Here, their change was that they were two companies that came together into one new company. So they needed to be able, they need to and still track, how well people are understanding the new company versus the two previous existing companies in this space. So they have run, the two surveys a year apart. So they had something to actually measure and see. So they knew what their initiatives, like I said, what to change, and then did we have impact on it. So we have a whole workshop here where Andrea breaks that down for you, what they did and so forth, and talks about the impacts. So if you're interested in this and want to go more in depth, certainly a workshop to check out. Another good play, I think, in Wynter to extend Wynter is people who want to be able to move up market. Again, this is something I've been hearing before I was at Wynter. This is like when I worked as a consultant at agencies. Eventually, all teams want to be able to move up market, and Wynter is a good place to be able to support that. So you're going to need to understand different things about what you have been previously doing. You probably need to talk to different decision makers. There's different obstacles in the way, and so forth. And so your goal here is to be able to try and uncover those things through Wynter Test. So whether that means you're just trying to move from small business to a slightly bigger mid-market, or often people are trying to say they're trying to move enterprise, which in my experience is also a moving target. People's version of enterprise is always different as well. And then you're going to need to be updating your messaging and so forth to be able to move into that space, and understanding what some of those higher maturity expectations are and so forth. A lot of different ways that Wynter can help here. The simplest and most obvious thing that we're going to do here again is the target customer survey. Again, for being able to collect, you're going to need a lot more qualitative information here, and be able to ask a lot more open-ended questions. The survey is the ideal right fit for that. I would also recommend that testing your current page against that new audience is useful to be able to see, like, how do they currently perceive it. So it starts giving you signals about what else you need to change on your current existing page. And then the other thing I would do here as well is I would consider one-on-one interviews to supplement this as well. We can help facilitate that at Wynter. It's not one of the things I talked about earlier, but we can help find people and get them booked on your calendar for the people that you actually want to interview and go deeper here. This is the right space to do interviews for sure. I did a lot of this actually before I was at Wynter for companies. So if you're trying to move up market, be able to sit down with somebody for 30 or 60 minutes and really go deep with them into some of these types of questions. The survey is good for sure. It will probably good to do that ahead of time, so you have some things that you can start talking more about, since you actually have somebody's time on the calendar, and make good use of that time, especially since you're probably going to be trying to book a senior level executive for that, most likely. So you want to make sure you have that refined. So I think the survey is the right step first, and then that'll give you richer things to ask and go deeper on with the interviews if you want to supplement that. The recommended question sets for this play, again, we have a what customers want survey template within Wynter. I would start with that one. It's going to align pretty well with what you're after. And then some other questions that I've seen teams that are doing this asking, that I think are also ones that likely a lot of people can utilize, are listed here as well. So you can certainly expand upon those. And then again, the full page test for what we're doing, the gold standard again is the right call here. Likely don't need to do any customization to that. And then I did put a little bit of thoughts into, if you did do a one-on-one interview, like what are some of the things that topics that you might talk about or want to go deeper again. Again, this is going to change based upon whatever insights that you first gathered. But these are the types of things that you're likely going to be wanting to dig into and ask more about in that one-on-one interview. So I provided those as well. The next play that I have is increasing landing page conversion. Pretty straightforward all in all, right? That's the whole purpose of the landing page, is to drive conversions. So you're going to want to be utilizing this one if it's just not where you want it to be, or you're putting out a new page and a new campaign. You're going to be putting money and budget behind that new campaign, the new ad that is going and driving the traffic to it. It's worth taking some budget and making sure that you're sticking the landing before you just go out there and start utilizing that spend. So pretty quick and easy to get some of this feedback from Wynter and likely still make positive improvements. The play here, pretty straightforward. Landing page test. First time I think I've recommended a landing page test on an actual landing page. But you're going to want to use that with either the existing page or the new page, whatever it is that you're running a campaign on. And then also, you're probably going to, this is in my experience, this is where you're going to probably get a bunch of different opinions about what headlines should we be using here. Whether it's before you launch a page or after you do some page testing. So the preference test as a combo here is likely the right way to go, just to kind of get some directionality on any of those different shared opinions, because you can put in those different options and see which one is landing, and again, why. So again, that's the part of why this works pretty well. But when I've talked with teams about this type of thing, what I hear frequently is like, we know we have the data on, are people clicking on this ad or are people converting on this page, but you don't really know why or why not. You're left to just sort of guess as to why or why not. So that's the important part that Wynter really fills in here, kind of all around, but specifically here. So you're going to be able to dig those things up and make some positive improvements on your pages. Another pro tip here is when you set up a test in Wynter here, for any of our messaging tests, there is an optional field called frame of mind. Definitely on a landing page test, I would recommend always doing that. You have to keep in mind that when somebody is taking a Wynter test, they are completely cold to your page or whatever stimuli you're testing. They lack the context that anybody in the organic world is going to have for that page. So it doesn't have to be anything crazy, right? It could just be as simple as like, hey, you were scrolling on LinkedIn, you saw an ad about X, you clicked it, and this is the resulting landing page. Or you were Googling for a solution about Y, and you saw, a link and clicked it, and this is the resulting page. Just a little bit to help them understand how they would have gotten there, or what problem they were trying to solve, or something like that, is going to help them give you better quality feedback. So this is useful even in other tests outside of this, but specifically here, I would always do that like 100% of the time. Recommended question sets here are just really the defaults that we have in here. I would say I listed these in here as well because I recommended doing the landing page test on other plays. This is the default question set on the landing page test, which in some of these other ones, you're actually going to want to modify them to make more sense for your page. If it's not a landing page necessarily, you might not want it to say landing page or something, but that might just be, modifying and taking the word landing out of there or something like that. So this is the default here. And the play that I have as a Wynter win here was from BigCommerce, and they actually did just use the defaults for both of what they did for both the landing page test and the preference test that followed it as well. But they took their old page, ran it through this exact play, and had a 147% increase in conversion. They did verify this with 2 different A/B tests as well. This is a newer play that I'm seeing more teams do with Wynter. So not as much intel necessarily here yet, but I think it's a really good extension of Wynter. Often when teams start doing this, there's one of the spots where they ask me like, can I do this? And there's no reason not to. I mean, you're not doing anything nefarious here whatsoever. I mean, it's important to understand where you stand against your competition. And so you would utilize this as a preference test. I recommend it against your competitors' homepages. You could, and I've had teams do, like put it in a landing page or their homepage. You don't need the full page test here. You can save some budget and so forth, but go through with the landing page test. And then if you really want to go deep, you could also utilize the target customer survey for this as well. One of the things I put in here where I've seen teams who have done that, I would say the survey is used a little bit least so far. But understanding what's happening in contract negotiations or roadblocks, or obviously easily more understanding how you are perceived against alternatives in a different manner than you're going to by just putting the homepage up there in the preference test. But these two, the preference test and the full page test, pretty quick and easy to do to understand how people are resonating with your competitors, and how your messaging is stacking up against theirs. And also just sticking their landing page in there, seeing why people may or may not be excited about whatever that offer is. Definitely people have driven a lot of good value by doing that as well. Again, like I said, this is a pretty new play. I don't see haven't had extensive people doing this for the last 3 years, but I think it's a really interesting way that people have started utilizing Wynter. So that's all the ones that I have for you today. Like I said earlier, there's plenty of other ways that we can utilize Wynter, but these are some of the most impactful ones, I think, and the ones that I see teams utilizing the most. And so hopefully this gives you what you need to get out there and start running some of these plays for yourself. And that is all I've got for you today.
Okay, amazing. Thank you ever so much, Dustin. That was super interesting to run through everything. And thank you so much for going so into detail and also giving those winter wins along the way. Hopefully that's very, very helpful for everyone. We will be sending out the slides and everything to everyone, but I'm just wondering if anyone has any questions at this point. It'll be really good to know if you have, even if you're new to winter or maybe you've used winter previously, if there's anything you're kind of dying to know. I guess I have some general questions I'm quite interested in, and I'm sure other people are too. But in terms of quantity, I mean, we're talking about so many different types of testing here. Do you have any advice in terms of how many participants people need to speak to, what they should be doing? What are the best practices there in terms of audience, and how much data do they actually need to get in order to make actionable insights?
Yeah, that's the answer there is that it varies, but it's a really good question. It does come up. So I actually, to reverse that for a little bit, I have a lot of teams who, like, our default on our messaging test, the minimum is 15. And people will ask, like, really? Just 15? But honestly, my answer that I give people all the time is the choices you have there are 15, 30, or 50. 50, I've recommended for teams less than a handful of times in my time here. You normally on a messaging test do not need that many. You are going to get solid trends and insights coming from just 15 people. 30, I really do suggest, if you're willing to put the budget behind it, you're just going to have a better understanding of the trends that are happening there. So 30 would be my ideal target baseline on a message test, but 15 is still what the majority of people are doing. You're still going to get very reliable information from 15 people. It's going to be amazing. You'll be pretty amazed. Like, you're going to see 6, 7, or 8 people saying roughly the same thing or having the same issues, out of just 15 people. And that's a pretty good directional to know, like, okay, I've got to do something about this. Surveys, it's going to depend greatly on exactly what you're surveying. So there it could be anywhere from 15 to, like I said, in the 100 or more, right? So again, if you're really after qualitative information in your survey, and that's mostly what you're after, then 15 and 30, the same thing rationale I just had, makes sense. If you need more quantitative information, then you're going to need to start increasing your numbers, 50 to 100 or more. Again, you might be able to utilize just 50 if you're doing kind of a mix of, like, some quantitative with some qualitative to explain it. Like the questions you're asking, the information will vary that for sure. And the preference test that we recommended, the baseline there is 30, again, to kind of measure out those differences, just like I talked about in the survey, just to kind of balance those out. You can go up to 100, and definitely have teams that are still doing that with 100 as well. Again, it's going to somewhat depend on what you're after, or how sure you really want to be in that the test or the data side of that versus the qualitative. But 30 is the baseline that we've moved to there, because we used to have 15 and it proved a little too unreliable. So 30 or 50, I think, is a good option in certain cases, up to 100. So
Okay,
lots of
fantastic.
variability though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. And in terms of audience, how do you know you're asking the right audience? Are there any indicators there? How did the team help you in that? And yeah, what does that look like in terms of targeting the right audience to get the right insights?
Well, like I said, a little bit, right? The seniority thing comes up a lot, where people always want to jump to the senior level. And I think it's important to consider your buyer journey, to know, like, am I asking the right person at the right questions here? But also, people are often concerned, like, how do I know that this is, who they are, who they say they are? How do I know this is, really a CMO or whatever? And my answer there is, like, again, most of this is B2B qualitative. Um, we can't go and talk this kind of shop with, like, I can't turn around and go talk about this with my wife. She's not going to understand anything that I just talked about for the last 45 minutes. So it will tend to show up if somebody's trying to fake their way through a qualitative when it's B2B. But also, we do double verify people as well. We have everybody's LinkedIn information. We do have them, verify their work email when they sign up and so forth. So we have verification on our end as well that they are who they say they are, and also all answers are guaranteed. So, if you feel like, I just really don't trust here that Dustin is actually a research strategist because he doesn't talk like one, then you can report that as well, and we'll take care of that for you too.
Okay, amazing. And we've just got a question come through here from Megan, and she says, "Hi, Dustin and Martha. Does Wynter synthesize qualitative insights from open-ended questions, or do you need to analyze each response?"
So that's a good question. Right now, it depends on the test type. So all three of the test types that I walked through, the answer is different today.
Yeah.
On our messaging test, you will get a thematic analysis, but at the moment, it doesn't break it down question by question or highlight by highlight. It will just take all of the information it has and produce a thematic analysis for you. In that case, I still do like to myself go through and walk through each question and so forth. But it's going to help give you like the themes really quickly that overall are the bigger takeaways. But there's a lot of gold still left to mine in there by like taking the time for yourself on that one. Our survey does take the time to do the the qualitative analysis per open-ended question. However, at the moment, it doesn't be able to do any like cohort breakdown of that, right? So it will break those down per open-ended, but it doesn't necessarily say like, okay, of the people who answered maybe a question, this other question this way, here's what they think, or so forth, right? So if you want to get a more rich analysis, then you're going to want to sit down and do a little bit more of that. And then at the moment, the preference test does not have an AI summary at the moment currently. So again, you do have to do that one yourself, but that one's a much more straightforward test to analyze than either of the other ones. And as I noted earlier, and in the near future sometime, I think we'll put together another workshop of like how to. I mean, you're going to go stick this in AI. Let's be honest, you're probably going to go stick it in AI and try and get it to do the analysis for you. And we can help support you there better with better prompts and engineering and stuff like that about that. And so a future workshop, we can definitely go deeper into doing that and taking some of the manual labor out.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, because I know for me especially, so for context for everyone, I do a lot of the insights that we have on our LinkedIn, and it can be a bit overwhelming when you get a survey through with 50 responses and you're thinking, how on earth am I going to synthesize this into smaller pieces and make sense of it? But yeah, the AI summaries are very helpful, but it's always so good to go back in and just filter through, because a lot of the really good quotes and little moments are things that AI might not pick up in. There's so many different nuances to how people are feeling. So it's always good just to sit with it and get to know it. I always spend an hour literally just reading and taking it in before I jump into any analysis anyway, because there is just so much there.
There is, yeah. And I know I linked in the presentation to that previous workshop. So even though I said we should update that, and we will, there's still a lot to understand from doing that. And so we'll walk through like that workshop walks through like how to do that thematic analysis and pull out some of those nuggets and so forth. So that'll definitely help you out if you're not used to that.
Okay, fantastic. And I have a final question. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions. Feel free to pop them in here. Just as I'm going to ask Dustin this next one. But yeah, I'm curious to know how you know whether you're asking the right questions. Obviously, there are templates there. There's plenty to personalize. But from your experience, how do you know if you're going for the right thing, and how can you reassure people with that?
Well, again, yes, we have the templates, which, like I said, we definitely have tested ourselves and made sure that they're utilized. And I think customers utilize those a lot. I also will say, like I said earlier, people get a little too stuck on that sometimes about, am I asking this the right way and so forth. Definitely, I've reviewed some surveys that, that the setup there could use some work, but a lot of times people will send them my way. And it's like, yeah, it's fine. I might nitpick here or there. But I think people come to it a lot of times thinking that what they're going to do in Wynter is like very scientific, which again is often not what you're doing with Wynter. Yes, there are times that you're doing that. So I think you need to be able to trust that the templates will give you a good baseline to start from, and then you'll probably know how to adjust them for your use case or what you want to learn easier. So if you're ever uncomfortable with that, definitely just start with the templates. There's probably a template for whatever test in there that is going to at least get you started. Again, kind of similar to, doing what people will do with AI these days, right? I got to get you started and you can adjust from there. Wynter's got all of that baked in probably, this is completely anecdotal, but like probably 90 to 95% of the time, the templates are going to get you started or get you covered altogether. There are times when we definitely need some custom stuff, and in those cases, that's what my role is here, and helping people and drafting those things up as well.
Okay, perfect. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Dustin. So I think that brings us to the end of our session. It doesn't look like we have any more questions here. If anyone does have any questions at any point, feel free to reach out to me or Dustin on LinkedIn. We'll be very happy to get in touch with you and answer anything you may have. But thank you ever so much, everyone, for joining today. It's been a really good session, and I'm glad that Dustin could get on here and explain more about what Wynter does, because we are so much more than just message testing. So it's been a really good session, and yeah, thank you. And I hope to see you next time. We've got another session coming next week, the details of which will be out on Monday.